working now. It completely cut out on my end. I'm guessing my internet had a fart. But I think it's back. And good. It's good and back. What happened to... Well, that's weird. Why'd you do that? There you go. Okay. Do we have music? It was supposed to have it set up to start right away, but it didn't. It looks like it's playing now. So that's good. Welcome. The lights are very dim. I don't know why this light is so far away. There we go. That's a little better. My room's a little messed up for now, but that's fine. I've been busy all day and got caught up in stuff, so oh well. That's fine. As I was saying, I don't know when I was cut off, but we're continuing Heaven's Official's Blessing. Book 2, The God-Pleasing Crown Prince. This is set in the past. Nothing we've read up till now has happened yet. I need to find a new font for Boycam. I've been told not to change it. Many people have noticed it, and now I just kind of think it's funny, so it'll probably stay that way. Also, I'm lazy. So this is going to be in the past. We're jumping back hundreds of years to see the past events of Xie Lian's life. So, Chapter 58, On the Martial Deity Avenue, an awe-inspiring first impression. Yes, this book will hurt. Ugh! I think both of the, if I remember right, there's 2 books that are set in the past of the 5, and both of them hurt so bad. I'm moving my monitor because for some reason it doesn't want to move over. Hello, new folks and old folks. Welcome. Sorry for the issues. Hopefully the internet is okay now. The sword thrust, penetrating the heart of the ghost and killed it dead on the ground. By heaven's blessings, ghosts are slayed and evil is subdued. On either side of the martial deity avenue, cheers erupted like an ocean current, coming in waves after waves, each one higher than the other. Before the crimson-red gates of the palace, in the courtyard, the 2 cultivators who played the roles of god and ghost bowed to the surrounding crowds and stepped down, standing off to the side. The martial match that opened the act heightened the excitement in the city. Not only were the streets elbow to elbow crowded, even the roofs were littered with brave climbers, clapping, hollering. The crowds were going wild. A celebration of this magnitude was truly brimming and bustling. In the history of the kingdom of Shenyoi? Was that what we said it was? In the history of the kingdom of Shenyoi, if any festival of Shenyuan was to be described thus, it must be the one happening today. For context, we are in the past, way all back in the past. This is the kingdom that Xie Lian was the prince of, kingdom Shenyoi. And the festival of Shenyuan is the last day of the New Year celebration. It's a big celebration. So we're having a big old parade and the whole city's going wild. Upon the towering platform, a row of finely dressed royals and nobles, all wearing courteous smiles on their faces, looked over below to the crowd. Within the palace, a long line of hundreds waited silently. When the bell chimed, Goshi smoothed... damn it, that's one word I didn't look up. Goshi? I will look it up next time. Forgive my mispronunciation. When the bell chimed, Goshi smoothed his non-existent mustache and called, "Path-opening warriors! Present! Crown princes, celestial fairies! Present! Musicians! Present! Cavalry! Present! Ghost! Present! The god-pleasing martial warrior?" No one answered. Gyoshi frowned, noticing a complication, and turned his head. "God-pleasing martial warrior? Where's the crown prince?" Still, no one responded. The one who answered to Ghost earlier hesitated, then removed the horrifying mask, revealing a clean, plain face. The young man appeared to be about 16 or 17. His skin and lips were both light in color, fresh and neat, with a pair of eyes black like obsidian, shining bright. His hair was soft and silky, a few loose strands lightly littered on his forehead and cheeks. He looked quiet and obedient, contrasting with the monstrous mask in his hand. He replied quietly. His Highness the Crown Prince has left." Gyoshi almost fainted, but for the sake of this grand occasion he couldn't faint, so he held on and shouted with angry exasperation, "What? He left? When did His Highness leave? The ceremonial parade is about to leave the palace gates. When the grand stage is revealed and there's only a ghost but no god, my old bones won't be able to swim out of all of the spit that'll come flying at me. Mu-Ching, why didn't you stop him?" Mu-Ching lowered his head. "When His Highness left me, he told me to pass on the message, saying not to worry, and everything can go as planned. He will return promptly." Gyoshi was hysterical. "How can I not worry? What do you mean, promptly? When is promptly? What if he doesn't make it?" Outside the palace gates, some of the people who had been waiting since early morning were losing patience and noisily demanding the event to start. A cultivator came rushing forward. My Lord Gyoshi, the Queen sent a messenger asking why the parade hasn't started. The fortuitous hour is fast approaching. If we don't leave now, we'll miss it." Alright, so if you didn't catch that, Mu-Ching is one of the people that in the future is a heavenly figure in the heavens that is a enemy, I guess. A former friend, now enemy of Xie Lian, who in the past, here we are, he's a precious baby boy. And let's see, somebody said something. 1 syllable OE or 2 syllables OE? Oh, I think it's pronounced Xianlo? Oh, okay, the country's called Xianlo? You are probably right, because I had trouble with that one. There's a Google Translate setup that says all the words for you, but just because I hear someone say it doesn't mean that my translation in my brain hears it correctly. I have processing issues. I had trouble with that one. So, Xianlo. Okay. Hearing this, Gyoshi prayed that a rebel army would suddenly invade and disrupt the parade completely. That this headache would happen right at the most crucial moment. If the headache were anyone else, he would have roared with rage already. Even raising his sword wouldn't be strange. But this headache just so happened to be his pride and joy, and the very, very, very distinguished, precious son of another. He couldn't beat him, he couldn't yell at him, and he definitely couldn't kill him. Rather than kill, he'd more likely kill himself. It's more like a le? So maybe like Xianle? Xianle. We'll try that. Then, someone ran across the Black Palace path, rushing into the palace, shouting, "Lord Gyoshi, why hasn't the parade started? The time is about to pass. Everyone outside is skin the color of wheat." His back carried a long black bow and a snow-white quiver. His lips were pressed tight, his brows knit. Even at such a young age, his eyes were strong and determined. The moment Gyoshi saw him, he grabbed him. "Feng Xin! Where's His Highness?" Feng Xin was taken aback, but instantly appeared to have understood something, and anger filled his eyes, turning his gaze to Mu-Ching. As for Mu-Ching, he had already put his ghost mask back on without a word, his expression one of the things I came across that kind of clicked with me in a weird way, this whole story is about people ascending and about religion and very much Eastern ideas of spirituality, Taoism and Buddhism. And the figure of Xie Lian is very much put forward as a very Buddhist figure. He is so, his whole catchphrase, heart in paradise, body in the abyss, that's very Buddhist. Like this idea that the physical realm of phenomena does not affect me. My heart, my inner self, my real true self is not affected by all this. It takes that to the extreme and says, okay, how far does a person take that? And he has these two best friends who kind of have very opposing personalities and ways of looking at things, but who, for a decent part of his past and some parts of his future, are kind of his tag-alongs all the time. And Buddha had that too. He had two figures, and Sarapita, I think, was the names are, there's various names for them depending on whether you are Chinese or Indian or Japanese, but I think it was like Sarapitra and Mogaldiana might have been the other one, and both of them are credited with being the origins of the two major divisions of Buddhism. And I just had that thought of, I really do wonder if her presentation of Xie Lian is this very Buddhist figure with two buddies who are very different, but also just kind of very important figures that tag along with him. I wonder if that wasn't the influence, where that came from. Anyway, I just had that thought. Is the buffering at a suitably okay pace to keep reading? Unfortunately, my end doesn't show me, unless it just cuts off completely, which it does not. It's not saying that it's cut off on my side. 15, 13. Yeah, I'm connected. Hopefully we're all good. I will continue reading. Let's see. Feng Xin said gravely, "There's no time to explain. Please start the parade immediately. His Highness the Crown Prince will not disappoint you." There was no escape. Bringing out a grand stage without the god-pleasing martial warrior was death. Delaying the procession and missing the fortuitous hour was also death. Despairingly, Gyoshi waved his hand. "Start the music! Depart!" Upon receiving the command, the flutes and strings started to play, and the hundreds of royal warriors at the front of the procession cried, beginning their march, leading the massive, impressive parade. They had departed. The warriors at the front symbolized the thorny paths of the mortal world. Immediately following were the virgin girls, specially chosen, beautiful and elegant, a basket in their hands, tossing flowers in the air like fairies, paving the path with blossoms and filling it with fragrance. The musicians rode in carriages of gold. The moment the procession left the palace gates, the crowds were amazed and astonished, fighting to catch the flowers. However, no matter how glamorous, how grand, this was only the warm-up act. The grand float, a glorious stage, was about to emerge. 16 white stallions, decked in gold, pulled the grand stage from the depths of the palace gates, slowly coming into sight before the eyes of millions. On the stage was a black-clad ghost, a monstrous mask on his face, a 9-foot-long saber in his hand before looking at each other, all wondering, "What's going on? Why is the god-pleasing martial warrior not on stage? Has His Highness the Crown Prince not arrived yet? Where's the Ongege?" Guga. The Ongaga. Oh, come on, Internet! Why is it like this? We can bother Gandalf. Gandhi! You actually turned your head. Come here. Come say hi. Come over here. Come say hello. Come here. Come on. Don't be shy. Yeah, come on over. Hi, buddy. Hello. Can you entertain us while the internet is bad? Aw, Gandalf, did you break it to internet? Did you break it? Say, I thought it was food and I eated it. I eated it. I could totally believe you would chew on the Ethernet cord, actually. He's eaten my books before. I have multiple books with teeth marks in them. Especially textbooks. He loves the feeling of paper. Like, textbooks have really thin paper. Well, English books. And it's really weird feeling. He loves it. Yeah, it's delicious. Good fiber. Good fiber. Alright, does it look any better? Oh, where are you going? Come back. Come back. I give keys. I give keys. Okay, well now you're gonna knock the mouse to the floor. Don't do that. Alright, we'll give it another try. Hopefully we can at least get an hour out of this. At the center of the tall platform sat a dignified, handsome man and a pale-skinned, amiable, gracious noblewoman. They were the king and queen of the kingdom of Xianle. Not seeing the one who should be there, the queen appeared worried and gave the king a look. The king took hold of her hand, using his gaze to comfort, telling her not to worry, and to watch and see what would happen. The crowds below, however, had no one to comfort them, and yelled crazedly, the shouting so loud it could almost raise roofs. The Gyoshi could only hate himself for not having the courage to kill himself right then and there. Yet Mu Qing, who was on stage, was quite calm. Even without his opponent, he looked at ease, taking care of his own mission, and clang threw his heavy saber down, resting it upright before him. Performing a round of chilling slaughter, the black-clad youth impressively ended the opening act of becoming a ghost. By face and by form, Mu Qing was delicate and elegant, like a gentle scholar, but an impossibly heavy 9-foot-long saber was still swung like it was feather-light in his hands, as if it was weightless. Another group of cultivators playing ghosts leapt onto the stage. They were instantly defeated and chased off the stage. The sword danced skillfully, calm and collected, and made the performance quite exciting to watch, so some in the crowds cheered for him. However, the people didn't come to watch ghosts causing havoc, so after the act, there was more noise demanding, "Where's the god-pleasing martial warrior? Where's His Highness the Crown Prince? We want to see His Highness playing the great martial emperor! Defeat evil!" Upon the towering platform, a furious voice shouted, "Where's my cousin? What the hell? Who wants to watch this bullshit? Where the fuck is my cousin, the Crown Prince?" No need to see who it was. It was obvious the loud voice belonged to none other than Shirong, the Prince Xiaojing. Sure enough, many looked up and saw a young man finely dressed in a light turquoise brocade and a necklace rush to the edge of the platform, raising his fists angrily. The young man was no more than 15 or 16, his face pale and his brows black, rather good-looking, but his face was twisted, as if he would jump off the tower at any time to punch someone. However, the tower was too tall, so if he jumped, he'd break his legs, if not die. So instead, he grabbed a white jade teapot and threw it. The thrown teapot was aimed directly at the back of the head of the ghost, flying at him speedily, looking like it might knock him out on the spot. Surprisingly, the ghost shifted his body, raised the long saber slightly, and caught the teapot on his blade. The quivering teapot came to a stop at the tip of the blade, prompting another wave of cheers. Mu Qing then flicked the long saber, and the teapot was hurled into the air, caught by someone below the stage. He continued to play the role of the ghost languidly, swinging the long saber, slaughtering humans. Qirong was enraged and was going to throw something else, but the queen ordered someone to drag him down, and so he was dragged down reluctantly. Yet the faces of the nobles were looking more and more grim, some becoming restless. That the god-pleasing martial warrior would disappear right before the heavenly procession of the Shengyuan festival was no laughing matter. Just then, a roaring cheer like a storm exploded from amongst the people, louder than the cheers from before. A snow-white silhouette had descended from the sky and landed right before the black-clad ghost. Upon his landing, his heavy white dress fluttered and covered the grand stage in the shape of a giant flower, a golden mask hiding his face. He held a sword in one hand, the other gently flicked the foreboding sword, the resounding ringing pleasing to the ear. The gesture was serene and confident, as if the ghost meant nothing to him. The ghost slowly raised his long saber and pointed it at him, and the white-clad martial warrior unhurriedly rose to his feet. Qirong's eyes were shining brightly, his face red. He jumped up and down, shouting, "Cousin Crown Prince! Cousin Crown Prince has come!" Above and below, all were stunned to silence. The entrance was like a real descent of a heavenly being, exceedingly audacious. The fortress tower was at least over 10 meters tall, and as the eminent crown prince, whose person was worth 1,000 gold, he still jumped down from it. In the moment, thousands had thought a god had truly descended. When they recovered from their shock, fervor filled the veins. The crowds went hysterical, applauding with intensity. Qirong, too, was shouting, leading the crowd in mad applause, shouting until his voice was hoarse, clapping until both hands were red. The king and queen shared a look, smiling, and applauded too. The rest of the nobles eased their brows and sighed a breath of relief before joining in the cheer. On either side of the martial deity avenue, crowds were going wild like crazing waves. Hundreds and thousands of men so excited they pushed against the royal guards, wanting to approach closer and holler. Upon the grand stage, two forms, one black, one white, faced each other. Each with their own weapon in hand, the god and ghost would finally face off. Seeing that everything worked out, Gyoshi finally relaxed his shoulders and mounted the towering platform. After nodding to his fellows in greeting, he found a seat for himself and sat down. The king chuckled. "Gyoshi, how did you come up with such an exhilarating entrance? How exciting!" Gyoshi wiped the sweat from his face and smiled. "It's indeed exciting. Unfortunately, this lowly servant didn't come up with it. I'm afraid it's His Highness the Crown Prince's own idea." The queen patted her heart. That mischievous child! To jump from such a height without a word of warning! I almost stood up in fright. Gyoshi couldn't help but lace his words with pride. "My lady queen can be at ease. The martial might of His Highness the Crown Prince is extraordinary. Tens of meters is nothing to him, and even with towers that are many times higher, he can easily mount and easily jump with his eyes closed." The queen appeared pleased and said gently, "Thanks to the teachings of Gyoshi." Gyoshi laughed. It's nothing, it's nothing. His Highness the Crown Prince, darling of the heavens, is divinely gifted, marvelously talented, and graciously brilliant. It is the fortune collected for 3 lifetimes that gave this lowly servant the chance to become his teacher. I have a premonition that with His Highness the Crown Prince's presence, today will go down in history as the most impressive martial match of the God-pleasing ceremony. His words of praise were smooth and eluded the heavens. The king smiled and turned his head back to watch the performance. I hope that is the case. In the heavenly procession of the Shengwan festival, the god-pleasing martial warrior and the ghost were the 2 most important roles. Both must be young men exceedingly skilled in martial arts, especially the god-pleasing martial warrior. The presentation and make of his costume were strict, transcendently glamorous. After dressing, the weight of everything worn came to be about 40 to 50 pounds. The martial warrior must, under this heavy burden before the eyes of millions, march around the capital many times and perform in the martial match for at least 4 hours. There must be no mistakes made throughout, and so the performer must be extraordinarily skilled. Fortunately, both young men were exceedingly talented. The saber parried with the sword, one slashed, another struck. The thrilling match was a sight to behold. The moves were also calculated to the minutest detail, obviously having been practiced and rehearsed a number of times. I'm going to show y'all real quick. Oop, I didn't mean to push that. Put that back. Don't move that. They've recently released a statue of this particular performance of Xie Lian's, and it's gorgeous, and the outfit is amazing. Let's see if I can find it. And this is the exact moment when, yep, there it is, when he jumps down. Let me see if I can show it to y'all. There it is. Look at that. That is the moment that he jumps down and the flower shows up. Oh my god. He's so beautiful. The statue is like, yeah, $300. Holy crap. But that's what he looks like right now. That's what he's fighting in. 50 pounds of weight. That's a lot. All right. Who's the one playing the ghost and parrying with the crown prince? The king asked. Gyoshi cleared his throat. Your Majesty, he's a young trainee from the royal pavilion. His name is Mu Qing. The queen said gently, I see that child is also rather skilled in fighting, just a bit weaker than my son. Maybe about the same level as Feng Xin. Gyoshi didn't appear to agree with her sentiment. Qirong had been laying on the lap of the queen munching on grapes and spat out the skins in a rush. No way, no way! Not just a bit weaker, he's far weaker. Not just anyone can compare to cousin Crown Prince. Hearing this, the queen patted his head, smiling, and the rest of the nobles all laughed, their bodies swaying back and forth in mirth. They teased, Little Wrong certainly clings to his cousin. If he doesn't praise him for a day, he's miserable. Down below in the crowd, the cheers and hollers were rising to the heavens. Fight! Fight! Kill him! Slay the evil! The roars of excitement were growing stronger. Qi Rong was also adding to the noise, both his hands around his mouth like a trumpet, shouting and laughing. "Cousin Crown Prince, go! You can easily knock him down with one hand! Show him how it's done!" Suddenly, the ghost on the stage slashed forward. The martial warrior repelled the attack with his sword, but Technically, during the Heavenly Parade, the martial match was a performance for pleasing the gods, and at most, one should use only a seventh of their power, ceasing after sword's touch. However, with the strike he received just now, the sword in his hand almost flew out. Obviously, his opponent had used all his might in that blow. Xie Lian raised his head slightly and called out, "Mu Qing?" The young man playing the ghost didn't say a word and slashed at him again. Xie Lian had no time to think and received one attack after the other, their weapons clanging. Well, this is more exciting than fake play, Xie Lian thought, and his spirit heightened, getting more into the fight. Thus, under the crashing roar of cheers, the weapons clashed and sparks flew. The more invigorating the fight was on stage, the louder the crowds cheered below. Suddenly, there was a deafening swing, white light flashed, and the crowd awed, their breaths held. The 9-foot-long saber of the ghost was snapped out of his hand by the long, slender sword of the god-pleasing martial warrior, and it flew toward a stone pillar of the towering platform, and became embedded in it. A few bystanders tried to pull it out, but even when they pulled with all their strength, the long saber didn't move an inch. What kind of saber is this? What strength you must need! Isn't X more a sh sound? Am I not hitting the sh hard enough? I will hit it harder. Upon the grand stage, the god-pleasing martial warrior shook his sword, flicked his finger on the blade again. Another tinkling sound, and behind the golden mask came soft chuckling. "You fought well, but you still lost," Xie Lian said, calmly but cheerfully. The ghost had lost his weapon, and half-kneeled on the ground, still silent, but his fist gripped tighter. Xie Lian craftily spun his sword, and under the cheers from all around... Go away. And under the cheers from all around was about to lunge his final strike, slaying the ghost, when just then there was screaming from above. Shocked, Xie Lian lowered his sword and looked up, and saw a blurry shadow falling rapidly from the wall. Oh my god, the music stopped again. I am sorry. Why is this happening? Shocked. Oh, nope, I read that. In that moment, he didn't have time to think, and in a flash he tipped his feet and pushed off the ground, leaping into the air, darting upwards weightlessly. He surged and flew, his sleeves fluttering open like the wings of a butterfly, then landed gracefully, light like a feather. Tightly in his hold was a person, and only when he touched solid ground did Xie Lian sigh a breath of relief and look down. In his arms was a child, head wrapped of bandages, dirty and unkempt, curled in his hold and watching him dazedly. Chapter 59, On the Martial Deity Avenue, An Awe-Inspiring First Impression, Part 2. The child was no older than 7 or 8, and quite the gaunt creature. Falling from such a height, his little body was shaking uncontrollably in his arms like a newborn animal. However, from the mess of bandages wrapped around his head peeked a large eye, black in color, reflecting the silhouette of a snow-white figure within, watching him unblinkingly as if he could no longer see anything else. Loud gasps were heard from all around, and when Xie Lian raised his head, his heart sank. In his peripheral vision, he saw lying on the ground not far away a golden object. The golden mask that hid his face had fallen. Everybody, feel free to get excited and have fun with all this, but no spoilers! Xie Lian had landed in the middle of the Martial Deity Avenue, and the ceremonial parade was miles behind him, the procession not having made it that far yet. The sudden commotion broke the steady march of the warriors. The flower-tossing celestial fairies looked panicked, and the golden carriages stopped. A number of white stallions stomped their hooves and neighed in alarm, and the strings missed notes, their rhythms disrupted. Some kept going and some stopped. Without being able to coordinate their march again, the entire situation was going out of control. The crowd on both sides of the street still hadn't had the chance to react, but the king of Xianle, upon the towering platform, stood up immediately, watching his son's silhouette, his expression worried and grave. The moment he stood, how could the rest of the nobles remain seated? Thus they all rose to their feet in a frenzy. Gyoshi's bottom had only just warmed his seat, but now it was cold again. He was rapidly thinking whether he needed to prostrate on all fours and immediately beg for forgiveness, and Chi-Rong had already leapt onto the railing, his sleeves rolled up, shouting in rage. "What's going on? What's happening? Why did the procession fall into chaos? What the hell are you useless trash doing? Did you all eat nothing but plain rice, so dumb you can't even hold your horses?" The queen's face was pale. Her brows slightly knitted, and hurriedly sent for another to drag him back. The crowds were growing agitated, and a riot was about to erupt. Just then, Xie Lian rose to his feet. Usually, the honorable crown prince was hidden deep within the palace or training at the royal holy pavilion, and rarely had the chance to show his face to the people. This was such a rare occasion that many couldn't help but be intrigued, their gazes all falling on him. Seeing his face, they all held their breath. The young man had long brows and charming eyes, dignified and handsome, radiating nobility. Let's see here. I have an issue. Unfortunately, the music is not looping, even though it's programmed to loop, which means something is wrong. Of course. With the child in one arm, he raised the other with the sword in hand and pointed it to the grand stage. The ghost had been observing the situation from above the stage, and seeing the gesture, he paused for a moment before leaping off the ground. The crowd wowed in amazement as the ghost, his form like a streak of black cloud, flew through the air to the stone pillar where the saber was deeply embedded. He pulled it out from the crack, then flipped again, landing in the middle of the street before the martial warrior. Seeing that he instantaneously understood his intentions and came forth to cooperate, Xie Lian lauded under his breath. Good mooching. Now both the god-pleasing martial warrior and the ghost had descended from the stage. One black, one white, saber and sword clashed once again, heightening the excitement, electrifying the crowd. Upon the towering platform, the faces of nobles finally relaxed, looking appeased. The ghost feigned the act to aim for the child in the warrior's arms. With both his hands holding the saber, gripping it to his side, he rushed towards Xie Lian. The two faked parrying, moves after moves, strike after strike. Then they leapt back onto the stage anew. While the crowd was distracted, Mu Ching used the chance to do a somersault onto the street, grabbed the mask, then dashed through the procession, urging in a low voice, "Don't scramble. Compose yourselves. Pretend nothing's happened and continue the march. Finish marching this round and return to the palace." All within the procession immediately steadied and returned to their posts, their spirits renewed. The moment Mu Ching returned to the stage, his attacks became even more vigorous, clinking and clanking, Xie Lian receiving more slashes. Just then, the child in his arms cried out, probably terrified of being struck between the clashing weapons. Xie Lian's left hand held him tighter, and he whispered, "Don't be scared." Hearing his words, the small child gripped onto the folds of his robe at his chest. Even with the child in one arm and the other hand handling a sword, Xie Lian was still fighting with ease. Parrying for a while, he felt the child in his hold raise his trembling arms and grab hold of his shoulders in a deadly grip, as if he were hanging on for dear life. Xie Lian soothed again, "Don't worry, nothing will hurt you." After speaking those words, Xie Lian called in a low voice, "Mu Ching!" The ghost, facing him, inconspicuously inclined his head, and Xie Lian struck. Thus, before the eyes of millions, the god-pleasing martial warrior pierced the heart of the ghost, slaying it on the spot. Bye, Liz. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Mu Qing, with his ghost mask on, clutched his wound, stumbled back a few steps, struggled for a moment before finally, thud, he fell to the ground and stopped moving. Above, on the platform, Qirong laughed out loud, applauding. "Dead! He's dead! Cousin Crown Prince has slain the ghost dead!" While all this was happening, the magnificent heavenly procession had continued to march, and soon moved onto the path back to the palace. Because of how well the act was saved and how the unexpected improvised act was exhilarating to watch, not only did the people not complain, but rather their excitement grew even stronger. Countless within the crowd were shouting, "Your Highness!" hollering "God!" and followed behind the grand stage, thousands upon millions rushing to the palace. A few of the generals had to send out many more troops of warriors and soldiers to block the overly excited people. However, in the end, they still couldn't hold them back, and the crowd broke through, pushing themselves towards the palace gates. The king of Xianle called from the top of the towering platform, "Guards! Warriors!" At the same time, the hundreds within the procession had all re-entered the palace, and the giant crimson gates closed soundly shut after the grand stage, the colorful banners of the performance now out of sight. The people rushed to the gates, knocking and slapping upon it, their cheers ringing to the heavens. Inside the tightly closed palace gates, upon the grand stage, the white-clad, God-pleasing martial warrior and the black-clad ghost both threw their weapons to the ground with two clanking sounds, before collapsing heavily on the ground. Xie Lian was covered in sweat and ripped open layers and layers of his elegant costume before exhaling deeply. "That was close. Too close. I'm exhausted." Mu Qing also removed his heavy ghost mask and let out a long breath silently, but didn't complain about being tired. When he looked over, he saw Xie Lian was still holding on to the young child and frowned wordlessly. Feng Xin, on the other hand, called out as he followed after the grand stage in a jog. "Your Highness, what are you doing, bringing the child in too?" The young child was lying on Xie Lian's chest, his small body frozen and unmoving, afraid to even breathe loudly. Xie Lian sat up. "What was I to do? Throw him back to the streets? It's a mess out there. He's such a tiny creature. He'd get trampled to death." He held up the small child and patted his head, asking casually, "How old are you, little guy?" The child didn't blink, and his lips uttered no sounds. Xie Lian continued his query, his tone soothing. "How did you come to fall earlier?" "Your Highness, the child probably doesn't dare speak. He's obviously scared witless," Mu Qing said. Xie Lian patted the head of the young child again, but his unresponsiveness made him lose interest, so he stopped patting. "So silly," Xie Lian commented. "Feng Xin, go find someone to take him out through the side doors when you get a chance. See if he's injured. His head's wrapped in bandages." "All right." Feng Xin extended his hand. "Give him here." Xie Lian held the young child up and passed him over, but before he could do so, Feng Xin said, "Your Highness, why haven't you let go?" "I did let go." Xie Lian was puzzled, but when he looked down, he laughed exasperatedly. Turns out it was the child, who was still gripping tightly onto his clothes, refusing to let go. A few were taken aback and started laughing out loud. While training at the Royal Holy Pavilion, so many devotees, men and women alike, tried their hardest to get a glimpse of Xie Lian, whether it be out of curiosity or devotion. But when they'd seen him once, they'd want to see him again. If they could train next to him, then even better. They couldn't believe a child at such a young age would be the same. Guarding the grand stage were many young trainees from the Royal Holy Pavilion, and they all snickered. "Your Highness, the child doesn't want to leave." Xie Lian also laughed. "Is that right? That won't do. I've got my own things to do. Go home, little kid." Hearing this, the child finally loosened his grip slowly, letting go of his clothes, and Feng Xin picked him up. Even when the person holding him was now Feng Xin, the child was still staring at Xie Lian with his large, dark eye, looking as if he was possessed. Many who were witnessing this started muttering silently, noting that intense stare. Xie Lian himself, however, wasn't looking at the child anymore, and only spoke to Feng Xin directly. "Don't pick him up like you're picking up trash. You're scaring him." Feng Xin put the child back down on the ground. "Enough joking around. Gyoshi is freaking out. Your Highness better think about how you're going to face him later." Hearing this, everyone stopped laughing. An hour later, at the Royal Holy Pavilion, on the Martial Deity Summit, inside the great martial hall. Clouds of incense wafted in the air, and the sound of chanting came in waves. Gyoshi and 3 other deputy Gyoshi sat in a line by the side wall within the great hall, their faces clouded. Muqing was kneeling before them. Xie Lian was also kneeling, but before him was nothing but the golden statue of the martial heavenly emperor. Feng Xin followed his master and knelt beside him. Gyoshi picked up the exquisitely crafted golden mask, and after a moment he heaved a heavy sigh. Your Highness, your Highness. Even when kneeling, Xie Lian's back was straight, his posture perfect, and his head raised. Present. Gyoshi looked pained. Do you know that in the history of Xianle, having held so many Xiangyuan heavenly ceremonial processions, never once did the grand stage only circle the capital thrice? Thrice! Every ritual of the Shengyuan heavenly ceremonial procession, every decoration in every place had a meaning behind it. To have the grand stage circle the capital once symbolized the kingdom's prayer for peace and happiness for the people for 1 year. Thus, however many rounds the grand stage made meant however many years another such grand ceremony need not take place. Not only did this signify good fortune, it saved money. Having only made 3 rounds, didn't that mean the kingdom would only be protected for 3 years? The worst thing, on top of that, was the golden mask on the face of the god-pleasing martial warrior had fallen mid-ritual. Since ancient times, the people of Xianle had believed that the spiritual aura of a person resided upon the 5 facial features. The spirit of a person was on their face, and the best must be offered to the heavens. Thus, in the midst of a ceremony, the martial warrior must wear a golden mask to hide their features, because his face could only be appreciated by the gods, and mortals have no right to see it. Gyoshi was both furious and disappointed. The god-pleasing martial warriors of the past circled the capital at minimum 5 times, at most 15 or 16 times. You can do 50 with your eyes closed, 100 even, but you killed yourself dead at 3. Why didn't you just kill me, your master, first? Now look at you. Our dear Highness the Crown Prince is going to go down in history, dragging me along with you. No one dared speak in the great hall, yet Xie Lian looked to be at ease and calmly responded, Gyoshi, why don't you look at it this way? If the child had fallen to his death with no one to catch him, spilling blood on the path of the procession, wouldn't that be equally ominous? Wouldn't the parade still have to come to a stop? At the very least, the ceremony ended decently, and it was the best-case scenario. Let's just call what happened an accident. For a moment, Gyoshi's words were stuck in his throat, but then he blew up. You child! With so many royal guards on site, anyone could have caught him. Even if the catch is off and he breaks an arm, he wouldn't die. You could have just marched forward a few steps, performed a little flashier, and everyone would have forgotten whatever had fallen and moved on. Xie Lian raised his brows. Gyoshi, you understand as well as I. Under those circumstances, no one else but me could have reacted as fast, and there was no second person who could have caught him without injuries. Let him fall, there'd be 1 dead. Catch him, and there'd be 2 dead. His words were confident and self-assured. The Gyoshi also knew that what he said was true and couldn't refute. But seeing him kneeling before the statue of God, looking like all was well and nothing was the matter, Gyoshi was all angry, all amused, and all proud. Before his precious darling disciple, he just couldn't get angry, and could only pull at his own hair and use the pain of his scalp to relieve the worry in his heart. After a pause, Gyoshi spoke again. Another thing! Xie Lian inclined his head. This disciple is listening. You did well on stage today, Gyoshi said, but no matter how well you performed, you can't just suddenly change things up right before the start without a word of warning. Both majesties were terrified by your act today. Do you know what would happen if we missed the fortuitous hour? Xie Lian knitted his long brows, looking puzzled. Gyoshi, in regard to this, hadn't I already asked for your permission before today? Gyoshi was taken aback. You'd asked already? Before today? When? Bewildered, Xie Lian turned his head and looked, calling out, Muqing? Dun dun dun! Drama! Chapter 60. Lost Red Pearl. Inadvertent eyes red with desire. Just then, Feng Xin, who was kneeling behind Xie Lian, spoke up grimly. His Highness... Oh, sudden sneeze. Wow, that came from nowhere. His Highness did indeed mention it a couple days ago. All eyes went to him. Feng Xin continued. Recently, His Highness has been putting a lot of thought into the heavenly procession, and yesterday came up with the extraordinary idea of jumping off the tower to simulate celestial descent without changing anything else in the programming. At the time, His Highness was in the middle of rehearsals and couldn't get away, so he sent Mu Qing to pass on word to Gyoshi to request for the go-ahead. He raised his head, anger obvious in his eyes. Mu Qing returned and told His Highness that Gyoshi had been informed, so His Highness performed today under the impression he had permission. Who knew Gyoshi had not known and almost ruined the event? The cultivators all looked at each other. Gyoshi asked, "Who knew of this?" The other 3 Deputy Gyoshi shook their heads, all denying knowing anything. Gyoshi turned to Mu Qing, his cloudy expression turning into one of anger. "Mu Qing, you intentionally withheld communication." His words and expression showed he already firmly believed Mu Qing to be sabotaging the affair purposefully. Xie Lian glanced at the silent, expressionless youth kneeling on the side and pondered before speaking up. "Gyoshi, I think there must be some kind of misunderstanding here." Hearing this, Mu Qing shifted his eyes to stare at him, his gaze going dark. Xie Lian said, "If he had purposefully held back word, once the event was over and we compared notes, his deceit would be revealed and there'd be no way he could escape taking responsibility. Mu Qing is not a short-sighted imbecile. He wouldn't have come up with such a low tactic. Besides, without the god-pleasing martial warrior, what advantage does the ghost opponent have? Please, hear him out, Gyoshi, and then draw a conclusion." Finishing his speech, Xie Lian inclined his head. "Tell us, Mu Qing, what happened?" Mu Qing lowered his eyes and said softly, "I did pass word on what His Highness bade me to say yesterday." Gyoshi frowned. "Won't we know ourselves what you did or did not say? When did you tell us?" "Yesterday, an hour after the evening lesson, when the 4 masters were resting at the Xishan Pavilion, this disciple spoke from outside the window," Mu Qing said. Gyoshi turned his head to his 3 fellows, looking puzzled. "Yesterday, after the evening lessons? What were we doing then?" The moment the question left his lips, he remembered, and his face turned slightly blue from awkwardness. The other 3 Deputy Gyoshi also coughed nervously, their responses ambiguous. "Not really anything, just resting. Seeing how the Gyoshi stammered, everyone understood immediately. The Royal Holy Pavilion was a place of quiet meditation and training, and there was very little entertainment, only some small games that could be counted as amusement, and one of them, the most popular one, was playing cards. Cards could only be played secretly, to be seen by no one. The Gyoshi had long been bored out of their mind, residing at the Holy Pavilion, so they were heavily addicted. When they started playing, they would forget everything and everyone, falling into a state akin to obsession or drunkenness, uncontrollably emotional, and definitely not able to hear anything from outside. If Mu Qing had said anything at the time, what could they possibly hear? One of the Deputy Gyoshi said, "Maybe there were too many people, your voice was too low, and we didn't hear. Or, we didn't hear clearly." Gyoshi demanded suspiciously, "Did you actually go to the Xishan Pavilion yesterday?" "I absolutely did," Mu Qing said, and as proof he relayed the dress, look, and accent of the guard standing at the gate without fault. Gyoshi had to believe him, but he still frowned. If you had gone to the Xishan Pavilion, you could have just passed on the message to the trainee outside the door, or entered the chamber and communicate in detail. Why speak outside the window? You didn't even confirm whether we heard." Mu Qing responded softly, "It's not like I didn't try. The disciple had begged the Xishang guarding the door, but for some reason, Xishang had to make things difficult and wouldn't let me into the chamber or pass on word for me. His words were taunting and he booted me out." After a pause, he continued, "This disciple had no other choice, so I went around to the other side of the Xishang Pavilion and tried to pass on the message through the window. After I spoke, I heard one of the Gyoshi say, 'I understand, now leave.' So this disciple had taken that as consent to His Highness's plans and returned." The Gyoshi pursed their lips and didn't say anything. Sounds like y'all are bad at your jobs. At the height of a round of card games, who would pay attention to whatever was said outside? If they should hear anything, of course they'd respond offhandedly with, "I understand." But in reality, they probably didn't know where the voice came from. Xie Lian knitted his brows. That such a thing would happen. Which trainee is this impudent? To be so disrespectful to one of my messengers, he's got guts. Although Xie Lian was usually kind and gentle with interacting with others at the Royal Holy Pavilion and never put on airs, he was still nonetheless the esteemed son of the king, the prominent crown prince, and even as he knelt before the statue of God, he had not shown any meekness or timidity. In the moment of sternness, he was strong and authoritative without fury. Everyone stayed quiet, and the Gyoshi wore unreadable expressions on their faces. "Why didn't you report this to me when you returned yesterday?" Xie Lian asked. Mu Qing turned around while still kneeling and prostrated, his voice quiet. "Your Highness, there's no need to look further into this matter with that Shishong. I didn't say anything after returning yesterday simply because I don't want to make this a big deal. Seriously, it's nothing major. If your Highness was to defend me openly, it'll hurt the friendliness between everyone." Xie Lian disagreed, sounding upset. "What is this friendliness with everyone? The kind of friendliness used to abuse others?" Hearing this, the Gyoshi sitting on the side looked even more agitated. At the end of the day, something like this happened because the Gyoshi disliked Mu Qing. Since they were displeased, the trainee attendants naturally followed their lead. Truly, Mu Qing himself wasn't that likable, so it was often that not only did fellow trainees inconvenience him, they'd make things difficult for him at every turn. Of course, this high and mighty disciple wasn't trying to be sarcastic, but he certainly did make a jab. Through his words, it was obvious Mu Qing was backing off, but Feng Xin couldn't listen to another word and suddenly interjected. "It really was nothing major, but you had to go and make it complicated. If you had told the trainee at the door you were to deliver a message by His Royal Highness's command, would he still be brave enough to block your way? Right before we departed today, Gyoshi asked you where His Highness went. Why did you answer so vaguely? Couldn't you have said clearly His Highness was on top of the tower waiting for the procession to start?" Mu Qing immediately argued back, calmly and steadily. "I thought Gyoshi already knew and didn't expect to be asked the question, so I was confused. But right after I told Gyoshi, His Highness had already said not to worry, and that the procession could start without delay as planned, that His Highness would be back promptly. His Highness might not have been there at the time, but there were many on site who heard me. So how can you say I did this intentionally, that I was being vague?" Feng Xin stared at him angrily, but if he thought about it in detail, Mu Qing did indeed say what he did. Only Gyoshi was too anxious and didn't want to make hasty decisions. So if he must pick at faults, there really wasn't much to prove anything. Just then, Xie Lian spoke up again. All right, it's all just an untimely misunderstanding. It's all just bad luck, so stop fighting." Feng Xin looked extremely displeased, but mindful of his position, he dared not be noisy in the great martial hall, so he stopped talking. Gyoshi didn't want to pursue the topic anymore either. After all, if they must get to the bottom of things, wasn't he at fault too for being too engrossed in card games? Thus he simply waved away and sighed. "Let's talk more later. We'll discuss what's transpired and think of a way to save the situation. The three of you are dismissed. Go remove your costumes and do whatever else you must." Xie Lian curtsied and rose to his feet. Feng Xin and Mu Qing both properly kowtowed once before rising, following behind Xie Lian, who was about to leave. Xie Lian had one foot over the threshold when he heard Gyoshi speak up. "Your Highness." Xie Lian turned his head. "Both His Majesty the King and Her Ladyship the Queen asked after you today. If you have time the next few days, go see them," Gyoshi said. Xie Lian smiled. "I understand." "Hello, Morgan and Alexis. Welcome and thanks for joining us." After leaving the Great Martial Hall, the three of them traversed through a large part of the summit and returned to the Xianle Palace Training Hall, built especially for the Crown Prince. Xie Lian could finally remove his ceremonial garb. As forementioned, for the Shangwan Heavenly Ceremonial Procession, the ceremonial attire of the god-pleasing martial warrior was exceedingly strict in every detail. Every accessory and fold had meaning and could not ever be misarranged or mixed up. For example, the outer robe was to be white, symbolizing divine purity. The inner garb was to be red, symbolizing canonical tradition. The golden crown that fastened the hair symbolized royal power and wealth. White plumes hidden by the heart meant flight to ascension. Loose cordon ribbons among the sleeves meant to carry all lives, etc., etc. It would be easy to imagine that from head to toe, both to wear or to remove was no simple task. However, as the esteemed crown prince, naturally he needn't do anything himself. He only needed to stand and open his arms wide in that refreshing, fragrant chamber and chat with Feng Xin while waiting on his personal attendant, Mu Qing, to help remove layer after layer of his god-pleasing costume. The outer white robe of the god-pleasing costume was of high quality, the threads delicate and exquisite, the fringes sewn with intricate light golden patterns, elegant but not frivolous. In comparison, the black-martialed gi of the ghost costume was a difference of heaven and earth. Mu Qing himself hadn't removed his black gear yet, his hands full with the god-pleasing costume he disrobed from Xie Lian. I don't know if y'all can hear, but the dogs just went wild. His fingers twitched, inconspicuously feeling up the material of the white robe. Next to him, Xie Lian removed the golden crown, letting his long hair fall loose, and sat down on the edge of his sandalwood bed, kicking off his snow-white boots, waiting for someone to bring him fresh clothes. He waited for a bit, but noticed Mu Qing wasn't moving, so he inclined his head. He asked, "What's wrong?" Mu Qing instantly came around and replied, "The costume seems to be dirty in some places." Xie Lian awed and said, "Bring it over and let me see." Sure enough, on the snow-white attire were two distinct little black handprints. Xie Lian took a look and remarked, "It's probably from the little kid who fell from the sky. I remember he was grabbing onto me and wouldn't let go. The child's face was wrapped all over with bandages. Maybe he tumbled somewhere or something. Feng Xin, did you check him out?" Feng Xin was just wrapping up the sword and long saber and replied grimly, "No, I took him out of the palace and was about to take a look at his face, and he kicked me in the shin. It actually fucking hurt." Xie Lian fell over on the bed laughing, pointing at him. "It must be because you're so mean. Otherwise, how come he didn't kick me but kicked you?" "I wasn't," Feng Xin cried. "It was like that damn kid was possessed or something and ran away right quick, or else I would have picked him upside down and shook him until he cried from fright." Mu Qing turned the white robe over in his hands. "The kid must have been a beggar. He's too dirty. Just a simple grab and he could leave black prints like these. Your Highness, the god-pleasing costume can't be dirty. Isn't that a bad omen?" Xie Lian stayed in his lying position on the bed and casually grabbed a book from the headboard, covering half his face. 3 rounds around the capital. I've already got a good name going down in history with the best record. If it's dirty, it's dirty. Just wash it." After a pause, Mu Qing replied quietly, "I will do my best to be careful when I wash it." Xie Lian flipped through the book and came to the page illustrating the art of the saber, and recalled the exhilarating sparring earlier that day on the stage. He smiled. "Mu Qing, you fought well today on stage." Mu Qing's shoulders tensed. Xie Lian continued, "Only today do I find out you're much more skilled with the saber than you are with the sword." Mu Qing's expression relaxed and turned around. There was even a little smile playing on his lips. "Really?" "Yeah," Xie Lian answered, "but you might have been too hasty. Swinging a saber is not like a sword. Look here." The moment the topics shifted to martial arts, Xie Lian became highly enthusiastic, even more possessed than when the Gyoshi played cards. He jumped off the bed without even putting on shoes, demonstrating his point on the spot, using his hand as a pretend saber. Mu Qing wore a complicated expression, but after Xie Lian demonstrated a few moves, he started to watch, seriously. Feng Xin, on the other hand, swung the now properly wrapped saber and chased Xie Lian back into the bed, shouting, "If you're going to show off, at least put on your shoes before you do. You're the crown prince! Hair loose and feet bare. What a disgrace!" Xie Lian was just at the height of his excitement, but got chased back onto the bed like ducks to the pen, and was rather bitter. "All right, geez," he said, and ran through his long hair with both hands, ready to tie it up before continuing his lecture to Mu Qing. Suddenly he frowned. "That's weird. What is it?" Feng Xin asked. And that's the end of that chapter. Thank you guys for joining me. We will continue next Thursday. The new reading schedules are going to be Tuesday, Thursdays in the afternoon. Scum Villain and Heaven's Official's Blessing. I'm thinking I might maybe alternate it every other week so that we can read more varieties of stories, because Heaven Official's Blessing is like 200 chapters long. We will not finish it anytime soon. Scum Villain is not finished being translated, and we will finish it sometime soon. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of alternate some things. Particularly, Thousand Autumns is a story that's just gotten the beginning of its adaptation. A new cartoon just showed on Monday. It's a fun story where the main hero is a man that believes in goodness and the ideals of the universe, and then the love interest is a guy that thinks everybody's selfish-centered and is mean. It's kind of the opposites fall in love thing. It's a fun story. I haven't finished it, but that's one I'm thinking we could read since there's not an adaptation to it. Of course, the book behind The Untamed, which is such a good show. Guardian is another really popular one that has, and of course these are all just the male ones. There's a few female ones that are super popular too. So let me know what you think, if you'd rather we just push through and finish the books we've already started, or if we alternated every other week to get a variety of stories. Phil, you would like The Cynic. It's a fun story. The guy that falls, the guy that thinks that everybody, believes in good, ends up blind and disabled and amnesiac. Like, everything goes wrong for him, and he keeps believing in the goodness of other people. And that makes the cynic be like, okay, well, I have to protect this one idiot. Like, he's not inherently evil. He just, doesn't believe in humanity as a whole. And so he kind of ends up being, like, running around after this guy, like, I gotta protect this idiot. He's gonna keep doing stupid shit. It's a fun book. I've read, like, the first 50 chapters, I think. There's quite a lot of stories. There's more modern stuff, We'll have to see what we do, because I know I only have so much time to read things, and I don't want to wear my voice out, but I also would love to read more stories with y'all, especially because I know for a lot of folks, these are hard stories to access. It's a different style of reading. It takes time and energy. They're very long. So, it's not always easy to just sit down and read these things, so I'd like to make it more accessible for everyone. Support the translators if you can. I've posted the links to the translators in all the video descriptions, but I'll update this one when I'm done. And support the original work if you can. There's guides on how to do that. I have no clue. Yes! Okay, let's do some female ones. I'm sick of stories where women are at best background objects. That's a very true habit I've noticed of either genre, where when it's gay men, it's basically dudes, and if it's gay women, it's basically women. Eldest Princess is one I had on my list, yes. I think that might be the most popular one. It's basically Mulan, but women and princess, and they fall in love, yes. I don't know about blind reading something I've not read before, because I want to be able to warn you guys of what's gonna happen. Like, for instance, one of the most popular stories around, what's it? Husky and the Shizun? That story is so good and so fucked. I don't think I could read that one aloud. I would, It's a good story, though. It gets very dark. It's very much about the idea of, in Buddhism and I think Taoism too, there's this idea that you are never irredeemable. Never. No matter how much you've done, there is this spark in you, the Buddhahood. There's another term for it, but like it's usually translated in English to Buddhahood, but like you are not irredeemable, even if you become Satan. And this story starts with the main character being Satan, and oh man, it's dark. So yeah, I might try and look and come up with some good possibilities of things to read aloud, and try and add a third day of the week. I'm trying to give myself a little more time off, because I know I have a bad habit of getting involved in projects and really loving, getting in that kind of thing, but then I don't have free time to do other things. I gotta balance it a little more, but I will try and think of other ways. Alternating every week might be a good way to be able to read a bunch of different stories, especially if I can build up my voice tolerance again and maybe read for 2 hours a day. That'd be fun. I don't know what's happened. I guess I stopped reading for a little while. Yeah, becoming Buddhist Satan is my new goal. Don't do that. Okay, but for real though, check out Tantric Buddhism, because the idea of Tantric is basically the idea that because, this is jumping so many hoops, it's one of the more advanced of Mahayana Buddhism, but the idea is because all is one, all is Buddha, good and evil are the same, and so there is no difference. And it doesn't mean that it's okay to do evil, it means that context is everything. And so a lot of their rituals and a lot of their imagery is very violent and sexual and graphic because it's meant to shock you and say, look, you know, it actually has no meaning. It is the same, good and evil. You know, it's very complicated. Tantric is fascinating. It's not just kinky sex, but it is also that. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. We will be having a lesson on Buddhism soon, probably this Sunday. Thanks to all of our members and to everyone that donated today. Thank you so much for your support. You guys are amazing. Thank you, Daniel, Phil, Kohi, Alexis. Who else we got here today? I think Maddie, yes. Thank you guys so much for the support. My voice is going away, so I am going to go and chill and see you guys tomorrow for something. Bye.